This week in the Pentagon, the Defense Secretary goes on the road to talk to airmen about the recent resignations of their top two leaders.
I believe that accountability must reach beyond NCOs and even colonels.
Plus,
position of attention, move!
The Air Force and Army push the limits of physical fitness for airmen and soldiers.
We're looking primarily at the development of strength,
1, 2, 3.
endurance, and mobility. The end result is to ensure that soldiers are physically prepared not only for their duty positions, but also for combat.
And retired veterans showcase their artistic talents inside the Pentagon.
It's like eating. It's just something I love to do.
Welcome to This Week in the Pentagon. I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. This week we take a closer look at physical fitness standards for the Army and the Air Force. But first, Defense Secretary Robert Gates goes on the road to talk to airmen after last week's announcement that the top two Air Force leaders resigned. On Monday, Secretary Gates recommended Michael Donnelly as the next Air Force Secretary and General Norton Schwartz as the next Air Force Chief of Staff, replacing Michael Wynn and General Michael Mosley, who both resigned during the first week of June. Mr. Donnelly is currently the Director of Administration and Management with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and once served as Acting Air Force Secretary. General Schwartz is currently Commander of U.S. Transportation Command at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. Secretary Gates discussed these top-level changes while making stops at what he says are three of the Air Force's most important bases: Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, and Scott. He thanked service members, answered their questions, and explained the leadership changes made after Admiral Kirkland Donald delivered his report on the recent nuclear incidents.
In summary, the investigation concluded that both the Barksdale-Minot nuclear weapons transfer incident and the Taiwan missed shipment had a common origin: the gradual erosion of nuclear standards and lack of effective oversight by Air Force leadership.
The theme of the Secretary's speeches was accountability.
During my tenure, I have emphasized to all the services that accountability must reach all the way up the chain of command, and that the military as a whole must be willing to admit mistakes when they are made. That is the only way to fix them, and it is the only way to ensure that they do not recur in the future. When systemic problems are found, I believe that accountability must reach beyond NCOs and even colonels.
Secretary Gates acknowledged war has created a burden on airmen and their families, a burden magnified by recent force reductions.
We know this and are working to ease the burden. And as I'm sure you've already heard, I intend immediately to stop further reductions in Air Force personnel.
After his Air Force Base tour, Secretary Gates flew to Brussels, Belgium, where he met with his Polish counterpart Thursday ahead of a NATO defense ministers' conference there. The two defense leaders spoke about the future of Afghanistan and missile defense. During the 2 days of meetings, Secretary Gates is expected to discuss NATO operations in Afghanistan, transition plans for Kosovo, and the alliance's missile defense program. They will also focus on Pakistan and ways to approach its new government. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen, traveled as well to speak to service members. On Saturday, June 7th, he went to Carlisle, Pennsylvania to address the newest Army War College graduates.
Sir, welcome.
Admiral Mullen told the officers he is concerned about gaps in U.S. military capabilities and highlighted the nuclear mission focus and performance decline.
A decline which erodes our nation's abilities to effectively deter and to defeat major potential adversaries.
Admiral Mullen said he respects and admires the decision to step down made by Air Force Secretary Michael Wynn and Air Force Chief of Staff General Michael Mosley.
That should serve as a lesson to us all about leadership. But so too should it serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency.
Admiral Mullen also urged senior officers to listen to younger service members, especially those who have been deployed. He also encouraged the graduates to seek a broader worldview in order to understand how others see the world. The college's graduating class of 339 had 43 international representatives, including officers from Afghanistan, Iraq, and other foreign militaries. On Wednesday, June 11th, Admiral Mullen was at Fort Stewart, Georgia. He held an all-hands call with the soldiers there and said today's Army is the most hardened Army in the military's history.
I can say that because I can compare it. I can go back to Vietnam, which was the first war I was in, and where we were then and what our armed forces were, and look at the armed forces we have now, and be thrilled about it, be proud of you, and then see the kind of impact that you've had.
Admiral Mullen also talked about how the military will continue to change the way it educates, trains, and fights as it adapts to threats. On to other news. This week in briefings from the Pentagon, DoD officials announced that Congress has approved money from the 2008 supplemental war funding request and an update on how detainees in Iraq are being rehabilitated. Wednesday, June 11th, Pentagon Press Secretary Jeff Morrell said DoD will now be able to pay troops through the end of July. Congress approved $1.6 billion for continuing operations and maintenance budget funding. Mr. Morrell said DoD still needs the remaining $1.2 billion in the supplemental funding bill that has been requested, which is still being debated on Capitol Hill. In a news briefing Monday, June 9th at the Pentagon, the former Deputy Commanding General over detainee operations in Iraq says detainees in coalition-run facilities in Iraq are being rehabilitated to become contributing members of society there. Major General Douglas Stone worked with detainees at Camp Cropper, Camp Bucca, and Camp Ashraf. He says new rules regarding the separation of moderate criminals from extremists have created a better environment for teaching those who want to reintegrate.
These efforts include education, vocational training, civics, Islamic discussion, family visitation, pay-for-work programs that actually empower the more moderate detainees, and they ultimately marginalize the violent extremists.
The general says the population at the facilities has decreased by about 5,000 over the past several months, and he says those numbers will continue to decrease. We have an update about a recent fire aboard USS George Washington. After the blaze was put out, the aircraft carrier sailed back to its port in San Diego, California to receive a damage assessment. According to a statement from the Navy, that assessment is complete. Most of the damage was electrical, with some structural and mechanical repairs needed. The fire was located in the ventilation intake exhaust trunk that leads from the lower decks of the ship to a ventilation port on the ship's outer hull several decks above. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Later this year, the Pentagon will unveil its memorial to the victims of September 11th. Thursday afternoon at the Pentagon, at the site of the new memorial, there was a ceremonial tree planting.
Even as the smoke cleared following the attack, people were rushing to help those who were hurt or in trouble. The Pentagon Memorial is just months away from completion and will honor the memory of those who were lost that day.
You know, this is a place to remember our loved ones. This is a place for everyone who witnessed what happened here that day to kind of reflect on what it means to live in this country. And it's also a gift for future generations and for the men and women overseas that are fighting to keep us safe. So it really is a very special place.
When it's finished, the Pentagon Memorial will have 184 memorial benches and 85 maple trees. Deputy Secretary of Defense Gordon England took an active role in the memorial and on Thursday helped plant one of those 85 trees.
Just a wonderful privilege and honor to be able to do this, to physically participate in the memorial.
The site will offer those affected by the 9/11 terrorist attacks a physical place to visit and remember those they lost.
My father worked here, my brother, my other brother, my uncle. All had reason to be here, but one by one we heard from each of them, and I kept waiting, or we all kept waiting to hear from Dave, but because I kept thinking that he was going to, walk up the street where I live, but, as the day got longer, you knew something bad had happened.
Secretary England says that first and foremost, this is about the families of those who lost their loved ones on that tragic day.
Because, of course, everyone remembers 9/11 and all the succeeding days after 9/11, all the people who were killed, all the people who were wounded. And so this has been really a long time, I think, for the families and literally for all Americans since this great tragedy happened at the Pentagon. So this is a memorial for the families. It's a memorial for everyone here at the Pentagon. And it's a memorial for everyone in America.
When the memorial is finished, visitors will be able to stand where I am now and see rows of benches and trees, while being able to reflect on what was lost.
Coming up, keeping fit to fight.
Position of attention, move!
Welcome back to This Week in the Pentagon. In order to be ready to fight, service members need to be in top physical condition, no matter their branch of service. Petty Officer Andrew Krause takes a closer look at how two branches, the Air Force and Army, are ensuring that when it comes to fitness, their people are prepared.
Down, 5, down, 10, down, 11, down.
It's crunch time here at Bolling Air Force Base for members of the 11th Mission Support Squadron. Saying no to the regular dose of PT is not an option, especially now with Air Force Command's challenging airmen to be physically fit for duty. Squadron Commander Lieutenant Colonel Diane Jones is leading a crusade of her own here at Bolling, urging staff to meet the Air Force standard.
So it's a key for the individuals to make sure they're passing their fitness tests, and if they're not, there's remedial programs to make sure that they're passing their fitness tests. So there's just an added emphasis for folks if their scores aren't meeting the standard right now.
The Air Force Fitness Standard was revised in 2004, an effort to boost health awareness and basic fitness levels across the Air Force.
So we needed to develop a program that was easy to understand and easy to implement. And then finally, we needed a program that the commanders could own. Because it's not just about passing a test once a year, it's about a change in the culture for fitness and incorporating it into our daily activities.
The Air Force Fitness Test awards points in 4 basic areas: push-ups, crunches, aerobic exercise, which includes running, and body composition. The bar was raised again last year when the Air Force made fitness results on a pass-fail basis part of all performance reports. With a failing score, airmen face disciplinary action or possible discharge. Airmen who fail are required to retest within 90 days. Air Force officials say it's part of a renewed focus on fitness, and commands are responding by tweaking those standards, setting tougher fitness levels to meet their own needs.
The plan is for the commanders to take ownership of the program and to just run with it. We see commanders that are very engaged with fitness. They look at the people in their squadron and the needs that they have to either do their mission or to be healthy and fit. And they develop the programs that they need to accomplish those missions.
Air Force officials hope the fitness push service-wide means more airmen fit to deploy.
While the Air Force requires 1 fitness test per airman each year, commanders have the option to conduct practice tests of their people as often as they wish. Next, Petty Officer Krause continues his report with a visit to Fort Jackson to see how Army instructors are changing the way they do business to adapt to today's challenges.
Physical fitness is a building block for a good soldier. Today, the Army is taking a new approach on getting its troops to where they need to be.
12, not low enough.
What we've realized is that we can't go from 0 to 60 in 2 weeks.
More like 0 to 60 in 9 to 10 weeks. However, getting to full speed isn't as easy as it used to be. That's why the Army has introduced the Army Physical Readiness Training Program.
What that standardized PT program does is it recognizes that soldiers come to us from a society with maybe some softening influences, and perhaps they're not as physically fit as seasoned soldiers are.
And while Army officials aren't saying they've lost a step, they're claiming they're training smarter.
We're looking primarily at the development of strength, endurance, and mobility, with mobility being the most important principle that we use.
More mobility applies directly to a soldier's ability to apply strength and total endurance to the day-to-day mission.
Position of attention, move!
Soldiers in the field, however, won't see the new training regimen applied to their PT routine anytime soon, and a few modifications could still be made. Right now, it's strictly used in the basic training phases.
The end result is to ensure that soldiers are physically prepared not only for their duty positions, but also for combat.
And at the end of the day, that's what matters most. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Petty Officer Andrew Krause.
Do what you're supposed to do.
So, what does the NFL and the military have in common? These days, it appears to be helmets.
Ron Dane.
It was one of those eureka moments. Army doctors home from Iraq and Afghanistan were watching NFL players pound it out and thought, that's what our soldiers need, helmets like that. Because, believe it or not, the effects on the brain of this can be a lot like this. Blasts strong enough to shake and even bruise the brain, often leading to traumatic brain injury known as TBI. Military records show over 30% of soldiers who have served in combat suffer from TBI after repeated exposures to blasts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Researchers at 3 major Army hospitals decided to test a marriage between football and the Army.
Let's just look and see if we take a football helmet who's designed to prevent concussion and jury-rig that into an Army combat helmet and then test it and see if we couldn't decrease the incidence of concussion.
Did it ever?
These pads perform better than those pads.
How much better?
50% better.
50% better.
50% better.
A blow to the head accelerates the skull inside the helmet and the brain inside the skull. The helmet's multiple layers of special foam padding absorb most of the energy, especially along the sides of the helmet where the most dangerous blows occur. Current military helmets have only a fraction of that padding. The military has sent out a call to NFL helmet makers like Rydell, telling them apply their technology to combat helmets and we'll buy hundreds of thousands of them.
We're going through an evaluation process right now just to see if we could bring some of our materials and design expertise to the combat helmet.
They've done it before. Founder John Rydell invented World War II's classic web suspension helmet. A different war means different challenges.
We're looking for a pad system that is compatible with the advanced combat helmet. We're looking for pads that can meet our requirements of sustaining blunt trauma at 10 feet per second.
The military hopes to run some of the new designs through their paces here this summer. If they find the right one, military officials say they could field helmets in Iraq and Afghanistan in less than 90 days, tackling the challenges of modern warfare head-on. Still ahead, a last day of school surprise. Welcome back to our program. It's the season. This month, thousands of children from military families are graduating from high school. And many of those parents and family members who are deployed overseas will get to see that special day, even if they can't be there in person. Master Sergeant George Maurer explains.
Graduating from high school is one of the biggest events in a teenager's life. Unfortunately for some parents overseas, it's a moment they'll have to miss because they're deployed.
We realize that that graduation is one of the most significant events in the life of a military family, really in any family, okay? And so when the war began, we realized that we would have kids who had a parent who was deployed and not able to connect for that once-in-a-lifetime event.
So Frank O'Gara, communications chief for the Defense Department's education activity, says 5 years ago DODEA started putting graduations on the internet.
Now it's grown dramatically over time. It's grown from the beginning stage of 2 schools to 17 schools that we've done this year. And we broadcast those live. We broadcast them, of course, it's a webcast through the world, so soldiers in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever they're deployed in the world are able to watch those graduations.
Family members and friends can watch the graduations by going to dodsegrads.net. Type in 2008 grads for the username and good luck 08 for the password. Then you'll find a list of school graduations in order of the day they happened.
They can find invitations and programs for the individual graduations, and then of course they can link to the live broadcast, or if the graduation has already occurred, they can watch it on demand for a period of time.
Mr. O'Gara says this project wouldn't be possible without the support of the commands that have helped.
They understand the importance of this. They've seen the reaction that they get from families. They've seen the reaction they get from soldiers downrange when they're able to take a moment from their, their task and their mission downrange to actually watch this once-in-a-lifetime event. It means the world to them.
And Mr. O'Gara says this is one more way DODEA works to keep service members connected to their children, even when they can't be at home. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer.
Right now, only graduation for DOD schools overseas are being put on the internet. There was another type of school surprise this week for a little girl from Cincinnati, Ohio. Both of her parents are away on deployment. Well, so she thought.
My name is Ashley.
Ashley Rodriguez thought she was doing a television interview about the last day of school. Little did she know, there was a surprise making its way in from the parking lot. Ashley's dad is Marine Staff Sergeant Jason Rodriguez, who's been away from home training for deployment. Her mom, Army Sergeant McKee Rodriguez, is just back from Iraq.
My mom served the... There they are right behind us.
Oh my goodness.
It's very exciting.
She was surprised. She was definitely surprised.
I was pretty surprised.
The hardest part was, leaving them behind for a couple of months.
The entire Rodriguez family will be together for the summer, much to Ashley's surprise.
I've been on a lot of deployments, and I've been to Iraq already once, and the hardest thing I ever had to do was to let her go and send her up here.
Oh, I didn't know if they could make it or not.
It was priceless. She's grown so much.
Ashley's dad had been away since October, her mother since last September. Military veterans living at the Armed Forces Retirement Home in Washington, D.C. are showcasing their talents outside of their military service. Current service members and others were recently treated to their works of art at the Pentagon. Petty Officer Andrew Krause reports.
If only for a few hours, they commandeered one of the Pentagon hallways, turning it into their own museum.
My paintings are more of like my children, and my children have to go off and find a new home.
Well, it's terrific, and it's extremely varied, both in the choices of the subjects, but also in the media.
We have a lot of talented veterans at the Armed Forces Retirement Home.
It was a chance to show off their skills to fellow, if a bit younger, men and women of the military.
So many people in the Pentagon know about the Armed Forces Retirement Home, but don't get to meet the residents and don't get to see what a talented bunch they are.
It's like eating. It's just something I love to do.
Mimi Rivkin, a World War II veteran, operates her own art studio at the Armed Forces Retirement Home, where she spends time working on watercolors, some of which are award-winning.
It makes you feel very good. I'm 86, I'll be 86 next month, and it's kind of nice to know I'm useful. I can do something.
61-year-old Vietnam veteran Warren Helm tapped into his passion for painting after his military service.
This is near Alexandria.
He spends at least 2 hours each day recreating the neighborhood places he finds inspirational.
I got the privilege of being able to go and to anywhere I want to go and paint whatever's there.
This isn't the first time these artists have presented their work at the Pentagon. At least 2 pieces decorate the walls of Secretary Arsh's office.
This is kind of our the inaugural art show, but we really wanted to showcase their talents really in all different ways.
While only paintings were featured this time, visitors to the Armed Forces Retirement Home also get to see a large ceramics room that showcases even more creative work. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Petty Officer Andrew Krause.
The artwork showcased represents only a small part of what the 1,100 veterans at the Armed Forces Retirement Home get up to. Residents participate in activities ranging from golf to fishing, bowling, and softball. And lastly, happy 233rd birthday to the Army. Several events were held in the Washington, D.C. area this week to commemorate the occasion. There were traditional cake-cutting ceremonies at Capitol Hill and at the Pentagon. Army Secretary Pete Guerin read the Army Birthday Children's Storybook to kids at Fort Myer, Virginia. Army Chief of Staff General George Casey and Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major Kenneth Preston, both read the book to military children at other bases in the area, too. And on Capitol Hill, as the Army celebrates its heritage, it looks forward too. Army leaders unveiled the first future combat system manned ground vehicle and the non-line of sight cannon Wednesday, June 11th. Army officials say these two systems represent the effort to modernize the force. That's our show this week. We want to thank everyone involved for their contributions. Please be sure to tune in and join us again next week as we examine some of the top news stories surrounding the Department of Defense. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. Thanks for watching, and happy Father's Day to all the dads everywhere. We leave you now with these images from the latest flight test of the sea-based Aegis ballistic missile weapon system. The two interceptor missiles were able to quickly shoot down an incoming target that was similar to a Scud missile.